Hey everybody, welcome once again to After Wine School. I'm Keith Wallace, and I'm here with my favorite person in the world, Alana Zerbe.
I came across an interesting statistic
Okay.
that I was unaware of. In the US, over 60 additions are permissible to wine or additives.
Oh, yeah, that's a high number.
That seems like a lot.
It is. That is a lot. Actually, I didn't realize it was that high, but yeah.
The question for today is, what is in my wine? Or as you would say, WTF is in my wine.
Absolutely. And I would much prefer to have all the F-bomb, but I guess we're not going to do that. So, all right, as a winemaker, we always wanted to say it's just wines in the glass, and that's true. We always want to say that, but it's never been true. If we just go back to the ancient world, like if we can go all the way back to the ancient Greeks, they were adding spices and herbs to their wines. The Romans, they liked their wines a little sweet, and they added a little lead to it to give it a little sweetness. I mean, talk about weird and awful. You don't have to worry, we don't do that anymore. But yeah, for one, a lot of things we do are natural. They're naturally occurring. We just may actually bring more of it in. But there are things that you may not know that's in your wine, maybe things you might be concerned about, and we'll talk about them by the end of this episode. We'll get into all the nitty gritty. But let's start off with a couple of basics, things that both in the United States and Europe we add. One is Bentonite Clay. Bentonite Clay was probably in your wine. So if you're wondering, why is there mud in my wine? Well, there's a good reason for it, actually. But also things like metabisulfites. They're in your wine. You know them as sulfites, and we know them as meta or SO2. And even egg whites. Even egg whites, especially in Europe, they'll add, especially in Bordeaux, oftentimes we'll add egg whites to their wine. So we do a lot of stuff like that. And this is, these are all things that are, of course, legal and safe. First of all, let's just point out there's nothing going into your wine that's unsafe, right? No one's adding lead. Like, there's nothing going into your wine that you should be concerned about for your health, first of all. But most everything, it's either to preserve the wines, to make the wines taste better, more fruit forward. And it really is more about the philosophy of the winemaker, about volume and how like shelf stable wine has to be. That's what this all comes down to.
So in other podcasts, we've talked about what's on labels. We've also talked about the science of flavor, but let's kick off a little bit. Where do our flavors come from in wine?
There are no flavors added, except in one instance. And we'll talk about that later. It's actually rather natural, but no, wine flavors are coming from fermentation, actually, for the most part. And it really depends on temperatures you're fermenting at. And the fact that when we were filming another episode, actually, I got a phone call from a good friend who's a winemaker, and he was talking about his Carmenere and why it didn't have its varietal fingerprint. And we were talking about, it was a temperature he was fermenting at. It was a little too low, so he didn't get that Carmenere green pepper notes that he wanted. But things like that. And those are actually just how you break apart sugar molecules, glycoside bonds. That's where those flavor compounds are. So it is all about the science and fermentation and not about adding things to wine. So, yeah.
And it's not about the soil that it's grown in. That's a common misconception.
Okay, yeah, you're right about that, right? I mean, how many times have you ever heard that? Soils don't bring flavor to wine. They never have, they never do. It is actually chemistry. It's very hard chemistry, though, too, to explain it. So in my advanced terroir program, it takes me 8 weeks of lecture and showing how and where you get flavors. But you never get soil flavors in wine. That's not how wine works. Terroir does not work that way.
All right, let's talk about something that is in the winemaking toolkit.
The most obvious one, that would be malolactic fermentation, known as MLF or malo. So this is where, when you're making wines, we're actually adding a lactic bacteria known as Oniococcus onis, one of the ones we use. We'll add it to the wine. We'll add it to the wine. And it will break down the citric and malic acids in wine. It'll break them down. And at the same time, it's also creating something called diacetyl, which is a byproduct. So we take a natural process and we've isolated it. And it's actually very similar to how we make medicine. Like, a lot of medicines are from a plant or an herb that have been used in medicine in many cultures for thousands of years, and they isolate the active ingredient and make medicine out of that. That's been happening. We're doing a very similar thing.
People do associate this with less expensive wines. Why is that?
Well, okay, that's a good point. Like, we all know like that big buttery Chardonnay, and there's quite a few of them out there. I remember Butterfield Station is one of them. But there's a bunch of them, like they always have butter in the name. And yeah, because what they do is they just focus, they dial that up. Instead of just going a little bit of mallow, they go 100% mallow and get that.
Almost like it's, the popcorn that's been clumped on the bottom of the popcorn maker.
Yeah.
At the movie theater.
At the movie theater. Yeah, that makes, 100%. That's exactly right. And that's that like when it's 100% mallow, you're right. It does. And it does make us think of a cheap wine, but it's not always. And it's actually that process of having like a buttery, if it's combined with richness and unctuousness in your wine, like in a Chardonnay, it's actually really beautiful. That's actually a very high-end wine at that point, when you can marry richness and decadence with that butteriness. Maybe not to the point of actually it's like rancid butter, but
right.
Yeah. But it's there and balanced. That can be really amazing. Because I learned winemaking in the 90s. I really love that. Like, that's my favorite. That's one of my go-to, like, high-end Chardonnays where it's texturally appealing, but also has that wonderful buttery note. I love that.
Okay, great. So this is a natural process.
Absolutely.
It can be taken to an extreme.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that brings us to our second item in the winemaker's toolkit,
Yes.
which can be similarly described. Not that it's natural, but it can certainly be taken to an extreme, and that would be oak aging.
Yeah, oak. And actually, to be honest, this is where we actually are adding flavors. So when you think about adding flavors in the toolkit, this is the only one that we really are adding identifiable flavors.
Okay.
And the reason we do it is we age things in oak barrels, and specifically white oak barrels, is because this was how we transported wine and stored wine. Was in white oak because it was waterproof and watertight. In fact, yeah, you could store whiskey in there for 20 years and it won't leak. It's amazing. But it also extracts flavor. Like, so there's a few compounds that you pull out of oak. For one, there's a eugenol. That's naturally occurring in oak. That actually gives like a clove spicy note. There's vanillin as well, which is naturally occurring in oak. But then there's also, like, because we toast the barrels to shape them, so then that char in the barrel, the compound that's created is called furfural, and that actually gives us that like almost a smoky note, which actually when you combine it, and all these flavors, when you combine it with like rich dark fruit flavors in the wine, it creates these really complex, beautiful flavors. But vanilla and cinnamon and nutmeg, these are all flavors that are derived from oak.
Okay, so butter comes from malolactic fermentation,
Yes.
baking spice, and vanilla. Those are our oak aromas.
Yeah, and actually, as you know, most people actually combine them. They think they're the same thing.
Yes.
And so one of the things in my L2, the foundation sommelier program, I actually have to train people to identify the difference between those two things, so they always conflate them. And that's something you should never do. So what if you're making a wine that you can't afford new oak barrels, because you only get those flavors if it's a new oak barrel. So what if we're making a wine for like $20? Now, for $20 a bottle, or even $30 a bottle, you may not be able to afford that $1,800 a barrel. Like, those barrels cost, and you can only use them 2, maybe at most 3 years before you can't extract flavors out of them anymore. If you want to make a wine with all those wonderful oak flavors, but you want to sell it at a price point that's not ludicrously high, something for every person, like, so that you can spend $15, $20 and have an experience that's very similar to something that someone was spending $50 to $100 for. If I want to do that, I can't use oak barrels. I have to use either chips, or more likely these days, oak balls. They're actually really high grade French oak, toasted, usually medium plus toast, which I'll add to our stainless steel tanks. And that will give almost identical flavors. And in fact, actually, I've even replicated not just wine like flavors like that. I've even done it with an experiment that I did with some of my advanced spirit students, where we distilled and aged a Scotch-like beverage. But yeah, and actually it was so surprisingly, we only had a month to age it, and I used those balls, and it actually became, it was almost exactly Scotch. It actually freaked me out a little bit how good it was. And that's rare. I'm really never shocked at how good something is. But that was, so that's how we do it. So like, that's an addition.
Something that you hear a lot about is our third in the winemaker's
Yep.
toolkit, and that's sulfur.
Yeah, sulfur, SO2, sulfites, metabisulfite. So meta is an antioxidant, and it naturally occurs in wine. It it's something that we've always used. Ancient world, it was always there. It helped to preserve the wines. The ancients also made sure they had a lot of sugar in their wines to make sure it aged, so it would survive as well. That helped. Now we drink dry wines, so we don't have that. But all we have really to preserve the wines, the antioxidants, the thing that actually destroys bacteria, that preserves flavors, prevents disease and decay, are these antioxidants, which are sulfites. And yeah, and they have a bad name, and they really shouldn't. And we did go over that in a previous podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a preservative, it's an antioxidant. And again, naturally occurring. It's just one of those things that we many moons ago, we discovered what was helping us make better wines, preserving them, and we just isolated it, and now we add a little bit, just a tiny little bit more to make sure that it works even better.
Great.
That's it. Yeah.
Done and dusted.
Woohoo! Yeah, absolutely.
All right, the fourth thing we're going to talk about.
Yeah?
This you've written about before.
Oh no.
And got a lot of pushback. But this was over 15 years ago at this point.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that you've read that. Yeah.
So, fourth item in the winemaker's toolkit we're going to talk about today, Mega Purple.
Oh yeah. Oh, do you remember, like, because that was actually that was back in the day. That was actually when I was writing for the Daily Beast. Back when that was really new. I got over 450 responses to that. Winemakers so angry that I brought it up. And yeah, back in that day, like 15 years ago, people were so angry when you aired our dirty laundry. And now it's just like spilling the tea. Everyone does it.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a very different but I was there first, people. I was there first.
I think if you had a dance that went along with it, if you had choreographed something.
Oh, I love this.
Yes.
The Mega Purple dance?
Yeah,
Okay,
if
let's
a
go.
flash
Let's do it.
dance.
Let's do it. See, everyone watching this right now, see, I'm jumping up and dancing. It's a very sexy dance right now. Everyone is in awe about my grace. All right. Okay, Mega Purple. And we use this, that's a specific brand, but there's many different versions of this that are out in the marketplace. And what it is a concentrated wine grape, where you take raw wine grape and you remove everything, pretty much everything, and concentrate except for the pigment and the sugars, the fructose. And so it is massively concentrated. We're talking, I think these days, they're up to like 70% sugar.
Wow.
Like fructose. And fructose actually tastes sweeter than regular sugar. It's insane. But also, so you add this to wine to actually increase your color and your texture. So if you add it after fermentation, you get massively pigmented wines, and just enough sugar to actually not to taste sweet, but actually to taste dense and round and lush. You can also add it before fermentation, and that will increase your alcohol. So there's two ways you can use this. And oh my God, yeah, I mean, it has been overused for decades now. It was notorious when I was in California. Yeah, you would see the delivery trucks going, and nobody talked about it. It was dropping off because a gallon of this would cost hundreds of dollars.
Now, is this something they do in the EU?
Oh, actually, this is not done in the EU. What they do is something a little bit different. What they do is they use a reverse osmosis machine, and mind you, this is only for high end. And in Europe, what they'll do is they'll take some of their grapes, and usually it's not been made to wine. Usually it's just the grape juice at this stage, and they'll extract the water out of it. They'll create a jelly, and they'll add that back into the fermentation. But that's actually for like the truly, truly high end. And I gotta explain like why we do this. And like this doesn't happen in every wine. The majority of wines never see this happen. What it happens is it happens in the low end wines and the high end wines. So in the low end, you're using Mega Purple or something similar to this to actually give it a little darker pigment. So your red wine, maybe it's a little light because they're pretty crappy grapes. You're adding that. And also like they may be thin and reedy. You're adding it to add texture to a wine that needs it. And you want to give somebody who's spending, under $10 a bottle of wine that's fruity and tasty. That's what it's for. At the same time, it's used on the high end because you need every trick in the book all the wines, at $100 plus, are all like intense and rich and decadent. Well, what if you maximize your ability in the vineyard to get these flavors? Well, adding a little mega purple makes it even richer, even more dense, even more teeth staining. So yeah, it gives you a competitive advantage. Now, and that's why. So low end and high end. And it's funny, in the wine trade, we do treat the low end consumer and the high end consumer pretty much the same. Everyone in the middle gets natural wine, pretty much. Like, we're not adjusting things that much. But it is actually in the high and low end. There's a lot more manipulation there. And I'm not against it.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that it should be listed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for instance, because there's all kinds of reasons why you would use it. But yeah, it's one of those things. That's the piece. That's the ugly piece, I think, in the wine trade, because you don't have to, because it's just grape juice. Yeah,
Right.
that I think. I really wish that would be on labels. I wish they did that, especially when we're talking about like fining and filtering, and like where we almost always are adding something is in the next stage. And for instance, because the end of wine after you make it, it actually is very cloudy. It's kind of like if you ever had like one of New England style IPAs, like a Belgian white, like they're cloudy,
Mm-hmm.
and the cloudiness is it's proteins and yeasts. They're floating in there, and people prefer they like their beer, they like their wine clear. Like, no, very few people want to pour a bottle of wine and it looks muddy, right? They don't want it to
Right.
look that way. They want it to be bright, fresh, and clean. And honestly, wineries want that too, because the things that are floating in there, that yeast and that proteins, well, they'll go bad, or they'll start changing the flavor of the wine. They'll start making, like, instead of being fruity, they'll start getting funky, really funky over time. So they want to get rid of that too, just to keep the flavors where they want them. So you have to if you get rid of them, there's two ways of doing that. It's either, well, there's actually three, but let's talk about the first two: fining and filtering. Now, filtering is obvious. You're pumping it through filters. Like, well, exactly. You've worked on them, but plate filters. They're a series of filters that you force wine through pretty much at a massive rate, like fire hose force through, and you can strip out almost everything out, like down to the microns, like 0.02 microns. Like, you can get pretty much remove everything, but of course that removes a lot of flavor too, but gives you a very shelf stable wine. So there's that. There's filtering, but fining is done by a lot of winemakers. That's where that bentonite clay comes in. That is a naturally occurring. It's a organic, what's also called as grass. Like, everything we're using is generally regarded as safe. It's FDA's highest term for anything that you can't eat, but that is safe to put in food. So adding bentonite clay, what it does is it is the opposite charge to a lot of the proteins. So what happens is they attach together, they attract, and they fall out of solution. And then they're removed. So yeah, so like that's it's a naturally occurring, but we use other things too, that, like, for instance, isinglass, which is made out of fish bladders. That's used as well for different kinds of proteins to fine with. And then, there's another way of doing this too. It just takes a lot more work. If you don't want to add anything to your wine, you can always just, over a very long time, rack your wines. So what this requires is that, because all these proteins and yeast will slowly fall out of solution into the bottom of a barrel or tank. And so you have to remove all the wine from the barrel or tank and then clean it out, and keep doing that over and over again for years, to have your wines clarified without using filtration or fining at all. But that's a huge amount of work, and that can only be done at really high-end wines, because the labor cost is so high to do that. Like, with a regular wine, I'll fine and filter, and also rack my wines, so that I tend to do all three, just a little bit, very gently, and I only use things like bentonite that are organic, that are vegan, and that's one of the pieces that I really wish they would include, is like, if you're using animal products,
Sure.
so that vegans would know or vegetarians, what kind of products you use. Now, that said, the products are no longer exist in your wine. Like, so if you're using egg whites or isinglass, they're completely have been removed from the wine. They no longer are there. But, there are people, I'm sure, out there right now who would rather know
Absolutely.
if an animal product ever touched their wine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if that's one of the pieces, I think just for ethical reasons, even though, it's not, but also that's why I only use bentonite. It's actually just as effective, to be honest, for what I want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, I feel a lot better. I think what I've learned today
Yeah.
is that many of these processes are natural. I loved
Yes.
your analogy that a lot of modern medicine is based on plants.
Yes.
And a lot of modern winemaking techniques, they're based on things that occur in nature, and that it's oftentimes just a matter of degree.
It is. You're 100% right. There's no reason to freak out. And honestly, the truth is that small producers, they do the least possible. Because every addition costs money, and also time. And there is a movement with small producers. It has been going on for decades now. It's called being a lazy winemaker. And it sounds like, we just hang out and do nothing. It's actually very hard to do. Um, because you have to be really good to know what you don't have to do. You don't have to add this protection. You don't have to add this much SO2. You do not have to fine. You do not have to do this or that. And it's just allowing wines to do their thing and maximize. That takes a lot of skill. But when I'm teaching people, like, I show them all the tricks. I even show them how to use Mega Purple and how to utilize that, because you need to know how to make wines. But then as you progress and become a professional winemaker, use less and less. And that's what we do. It's only in the high volume wines where you really see a push towards using a lot of ingredients. Just stay. Don't go cheap. Don't go expensive. Stay small producers. You're going to be fine. And if this fascinates you, if you want to take your knowledge level up a couple notches, check out the National Wine School. Online certification programs at wineschool.us, but also offered at all the finest wine schools and universities in America. So that's what I say. But however, you can also visit us.
What I say is, if you happen to be in the Philadelphia area, folks, please come by, drop in for a class. You will see either one of us in action teaching at the Wine School of Philadelphia. And if you liked today's podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. Leave us a note in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thanks so much.
Cheers.